There it goes. Check, check, check.
Be right back. I'm going to, this is a Wake Med thing where certain Macs go to HTCP. Let me grab Pete and see.
Thank you.
Might want to try yours, Lance. You planning on using yours later?
No.
Okay, it's just that one?
Yeah, this is just me editing with
Okay,
the...
give me a second.
Thanks.
Yep.
the kind of angle you can get from
Well, wait, just wait till he comes and we'll show you.
Yeah, I mean, we have the one in the back that will shoot this way. It's more like a straight shot cross. I mean, this one kind of angles down, but I don't think it'll go straight down.
Okay, well, we know what the question is, so whenever he gets here and we got time, we'll show him what to do. That way he can decide.
Yeah. Because that's typically the one we use for like the managers meetings to get done.
I grabbed this adapter. I guys, because I thought we'd addressed this already. Come up with that. I think if I get her on if you're not using the other connection, I think if I get her on VGA with the Mac, she should be good. Of course, I have the right of the myriad Mac adapters that we have to carry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the face of SimGHOSTS, our president, Dr. Scott Crawford. Scott?
Thank you all for coming. We're looking forward to a great conference here. Hope you're enjoying the networking already and get a chance to see the facilities. It's a phenomenal center. If anybody needs me, I'll be back in the Sim Lab.
Thank you, Scott. All right. Okay, everyone, welcome to SimGHOSTS 2017 USA. My name is Lance Bailey. I'm the founder of the organization, and I can't believe it, but this is our 7th U.S. event, North American event, and our main event. So thank you all so much for coming to something that we've been starting and growing for many, many years. So I very much appreciate that and all the support that we've been getting from our teams today. So just some quick notes that we'll go through about what's going on in the next little bit and what's going on with the event overall. We've got the hashtag SG17USA. If you're following us along on Twitter, of course, the main hashtag for the community is hashtag simulation. We're at SimGHOSTS, and then, of course, at WakeMed here. If you're so inclined, we're actually streaming live. So if you're interested, you can share the link, http bit.ly. And that's /SG17 live, so you can actually watch that feed live and share back home with the folks that are going to be watching and joining us potentially. So first of all, I'd like to have a round of applause for our host here at WakeMed and Dr. Amar Patel and his team. I'd say over 2,000 emails and endless phone calls and planning went into putting this event together from all the different staff members, both on their side and ours. And so it's a huge investment on their part to bring us all here together and help to deal with all of the different components to put together a successful event. So we're very much appreciative of their support. Dr. Amar, Dr. Patel and I have worked on several simulation projects around the world, and he's just an absolutely fantastic person. So I really encourage you to connect with him and learn more about the program here. So I'd like to offer up a round of applause to Sim Alliance, our platinum sponsor this year, for continuing to support the organization. You might notice that SimGHOSTS is a little bit more connected with our vendors. We don't offer the CEUs or CMUs because we want the vendors in the room. We want to be able to have a direct conversation with them so that you all can gain those benefits of having those direct experiences with them. And so their support not only goes to putting on the event, but also their support helps us throughout the entire year with regards to everything from accounting costs with CPAs to go-to-meeting costs and shipping and receiving, all the things that go into a nonprofit organization to make the thing actually work, right? So we very much appreciate their support. We're going to be getting a fantastic keynote from Dr. Gillette today, who's the CEO and founder of SimCore, one of the partners of Sim Alliance on partnership, creativity, and innovation, successful management, support, and growth in healthcare simulation. So excited about that. And then, of course, tonight, Sim Alliance, as our platinum sponsor, is sponsoring the Good Nights comedy event, stand-up event, which is leaving here right after the show. So it is a long day, but the buses leave directly from here at 5:30. They go straight to Good Nights, which is on the other side of the city. Dinner and drinks starts at 6, and then I believe the show itself actually starts around 7:45. So if you come with us, for sure, you have a spot. If you come late, they will open into the public around 7:30ish or so, and so we hope that you join us from the get-go so that we can guarantee your spot. And when we did our site visit out here many months back, it was a really fantastic time, and I'm sure that if you'll talk to any of the folks that have come to SimGHOSTS events in the past, they'll say that we throw one of the best parties in the whole industry, so definitely want to join us tonight at that. Is there anyone at this point who's definitely unable to attend and is not coming? If I could get a show of hands, because we're just trying to figure out about buses. Is there anyone for sure unable? Okay, just a handful, so that's fine. So regular bus schedule. We're going to try to work with the buses so that the last bus that leaves, we'll see how full it is. If it has to, it will first go to the comedy club, and then it'll swing back down to the hotel. It's only an extra 5 minutes, so 10 minutes. It won't take long at all. So if you are trying to get back to the hotel, we're going to try to send that last bus directly or through a circle, depending on how many people come through. Of course, I'd also like to give a round of applause to our gold sponsors, CAE, Laerdal, and EMS. So with their support, we were able to have another plenary address from Dr. Patel, as well from Dr. Crawford, our president. That's actually what he looks like, not the mannequin. That's his night job. And of course, from EMS, we had the first organizationally sponsored hackathon event yesterday, where we had 3 teams compete for a full-day event with different tools, 3D printers, some moulage equipment, programming, Arduinos, and hardware to build some various projects to address a need within the community. And so we'll be announcing those winners shortly in terms of who won and what project they had put together. We have silver sponsors who are also providing courses beyond the platinum and the gold sponsors here at the event, and so we appreciate their support. And then, of course, our bronze sponsors out in the exhibit hall. So lastly, we want to mention Pocket Nurse, who has provided a scholarship, 2 $1,500 scholarships, and so we appreciate their support to enable nonprofit organizations to be able to attend and to join the meeting, and we'll share more about that as well. Finally, Laerdal's kind enough to help us out with some backyard bistro. We can't come to North Carolina and not have barbecue, so this fantastic restaurant is going to be serving us on Thursday. These folks on the left, we noticed that you had catering requests, so please look out for those. They will be separate from the main lines. We'll put those up at the reception desk, so for those of you with special dietary needs, we've got you covered. So, are you interested in $250 of Amazon gift cards? Well, then get stamped. So, the bingo cards that you have inside your bag, it has a logo for every one of the vendors. They each have their own specialized stamp. We've got a secret key hidden away back in the offices, so we'll check it and make sure that it's referenced specifically for each one of those vendors. And then at the end of the day, I believe Thursday, when the vendor hall closes at 4 p.m. on Thursday, we'll be announcing those winners. So if actually, if you look in your bags, two of you should have my business card in your bag. There's one. And there's another. All right. You two have already won SimGHOSTS t-shirts. We're going to get those to you, so congrats on that. That's a super rare item because they've sold out, and we haven't been able to get another order in just yet, so congrats on you, and we'll be doing little prizes like that throughout the entire event. So please do take a look at what's going on in the bag. There's lots of great material in there, and hopefully you've also all received your individual itemized course lists about what you're attending. For sure, the Whova app, which is instructions on how to get that, is on the back of your badge. The Whova app is the best way to see updates with regards to the schedule. If there's any course changes, we're going to go into that app, and so you can directly see what's going on with regards to particular courses. So the two folks who won the t-shirts, if you could raise your hands again, we got those t-shirts coming to you over there. Thank you. And so we definitely know that we'll thank you. Okay, so let's see. Surveys as well are in there. So we're doing a final survey for this particular event, so please look out for that. If you leave early, just leave. We're going to have a box at the reception desk out there as well. We'll just please just fill that one out for sure, because that gives us the feedback we need in order to be able to provide continual improvements as we go. Lastly, the Whova app, I've noticed just yesterday when we launched it with the pre-con, we already had about 90 people signed up and great conversations, mostly about which bar people were at last night. So I would suggest that you get on that because it's definitely going to be a great way to connect and hang out with everyone. So just briefly, we're going to talk about, what has SimGHOSTS been doing this past year, since last year, before, other than working hard to put on this event. We've provided global support. We've done events supporting in France for the Society for Simulation. In Europe, we've been to Lebanon to help with new simulation programs across the entire country, and as well, later this year, we're going to be at Singapore with Sezam again at SimGHOSTS, working hard to be able to try to build those network supports. So it's not just about North America, but our 3,000 subscribers, they come from all over the world. And so, when we first founded this organization, the impetus was, well, why would a SimTech in Los Angeles, California, and a SimTech in Mumbai, India, they're dealing with the same problems. Why not give them the resources they need to be able to communicate and make their jobs easier? So, of course, we've also worked with, we have about 8 affiliations already. In this past year, we worked hard to add more, and we'll be hearing from Nick Brower about that a little bit later as our community director for the board. We've also been working specifically with the GNSH, or Global Network for Simulation and Healthcare organization, which is kind of like an apex organization for the entire industry as a whole. All the leadership from the major vendors as well as the major organizations come together to try to solve industry-wide problems. We've supported with them this past year in a lot of ways, and we'll go into some of those details a little bit later on in the event. We've also been working on our online courses, which are courses for our subscribers that can be able to then continue some education for. So these are the courses that we've been able to create so far, and then as well as an opportunity for you all to build course materials and earn a share of the revenue that we gather from the courses that you guys have created when people sign up. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that as well in the near future. So before our keynote with Dr. Gillette, we've got a special bonus keynote from Anaxel and Carol Durham, because recently they just launched their latest version of their standards. I think it was, gosh, 3, 4, 5 years ago, about 4 years ago. I was sitting on a flight with some of the other SimGHOSTS leadership. It was, I think, about a 12-hour flight, and we started supporting the organization by creating a SimTech specific, or simulation technology operations specific standard, because they were previously at that point numbered, and so we created a new one, which then kind of helped to launch the creation and creation of the support of those operating simulation. And so the standards are absolutely crucial. They're the best way to provide information to higher levels of administration with regards to, if you want to take simulation seriously, these are the standards that you need to uphold, and those have a direct relationship with regards to now our career paths here, and that's for both any of you that are full-time technical staff or full-time clinical educators who are also operating these technologies, to be able to get those administrators at different levels to understand what is it going to take for us to be successful. So with that being said, I'd like to bring Carol up here and hear from her about the new standards. So Carol? Oh, do you want the PowerPoint slide? Okay. I'll close that one.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So thank you, Lance, for a lovely introduction. I am privileged to be the past president of the International Nursing Association for Clinical Simulation and Learning, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a history about the standards, but wanted to just see how many people know about the standards and are using them already. So there's a handful of people in the room who have, and so this is to whet your appetite and give you an opportunity to those who have not had the opportunity to look at them, to examine them and think about integrating them into your program.
I apologize. apologize, but actually this, I didn't realize this bead doesn't have.
That's fine.
Okay, but you just two
Yep.
fingers and scroll.
Okay, thanks. So these have been revised in 2016, and so I don't have any conflicts of interest or disclosures to give you. The objectives for this little bit of time is to just give you the resources that you might need for the NACSL standards of best practice, and also to identify strategies that you might take back and integrate into your programs, particularly around the design and creation of the work that you are doing, and then determine resources needed to operationalize the standards at your institution. There are a few key references here that I need for you to think about downloading. One is, of course, getting to the NACSL standards, and they are free download. They're PDFs that you can download, or if you choose to have a hard copy in your lab, you can purchase a hard copy from naxl.org. I think it's $10 if you're a member, $15 if you're not. But again, you can download these freely, individually, and have them available for all of the people working in your labs. Many of you may already know about the Simulation Dictionary that was put together by multiple organizations but sponsored by the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, and that is a great download to have as a resource, particularly as we're trying to use the same terminology, and if you're writing grants or actually trying to do things using the same words really help. Or if people say to you, what is the definition for a simulationist? Or what is the definition for embedded actor? This gives you a standard national reference to go to. Again, that is a free download. It was supported by AHRQ, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Then the IPEC competencies, if you're doing any interprofessional, which I imagine all of you are, you do want to look at the IPEC competencies, which are looking at the guidelines for teaching interprofessionally, and they were revised in 2016. They were first done in 2011, so you go back to the original document and download it for free, and then the upgrade in 2016. Then the National Council of State Boards of Nursing had a Sentinel study. Many of you already know about that, but that was in 2014. And so that is also a free download, and this year after that, in 2015, they brought together leaders to talk about if people are going to start using 50% of simulation for their clinical experiences, they really need guidelines to do that, because we just don't want people to just go do it and it be all over the board. So the National Council then convened a group of people to look at what are the guidelines. Both in the study and in the guidelines, the NACSL standards are referenced as a way to develop quality simulations. And that's why SimGHOSTS has offered this opportunity for us to give you this information. And I want to say with a heartfelt gratitude to Lance for making an opportunity for this. Thank you, Lance. So we began work on the standards in 2009. They were first published in 2011, revised in 2013. They were vetted by organizations, so it's not just one organization's perspective. And I'm going to give you a quick glance of that list. Lance will have this slide deck to distribute to you after today. And then when this national study came out, lots of people were trying to figure out what are those standards and what do they mean to my practice. 2 standards were added in 2015 as well. The organizations that review the standards are Pediatric and also Nursing and Royal College of Physicians, Australia and British Columbia, and the International Council of Nursing. So you can see there's quite a few people who have laid their eyes on this and given us feedback about it. So we changed the formatting. We removed numbers because numbers implied hierarchy, and terminology was one, and certainly that's not the most important thing that we do. So we think that it's better just to have names and people choose which one they enter first. And we changed it to a glossary since the dictionary came out. Makes a lot of sense not to have a terminology after that. And then, of course, it was updated with evidence. So here are the 2016 simulation guidelines. And if you want to start out and figure out where do I begin, read the simulation design one first. And after that, the others kind of unfold more about each one of those. And so outcomes and objectives, which we're all thinking about where we're going when we begin the simulation, and that's going to be how we're going to evaluate. So think about what are your outcomes and what are your objectives, and facilitation, debriefing, evaluation, professional integrity, SimIPE, and then the glossary. I'm going to talk briefly about that because I know you have a packed agenda, and I was given a small slot of time with gratitude. So the one I want to spend the most time on is actually the design one, and this is the reference for it, and the authors are identified in that. But simulation-based experiences are purposely designed so that you can identify the objectives and optimize the outcomes. You might remember that in 2015, the Institute of Medicine, which now is the National Academies of Medicine, issued a document that is a good download that talks about measuring outcomes of interprofessional education to impact patients. One of the things that I think is going to be a call for us soon is how do we measure simulation to impact patients? And the work that we've been doing for the Global Networking for Simulation in Healthcare, and there are others in the room, some of our vendors as well, I see Lynn in the back and Scott, have been working on this together to really look at that return on investment and value on investment for simulation. That we're not doing simulation just because it's the latest trend, but to really make a difference in patients. And so when you think about it, we really are all about the same thing. No matter if you're physician, pharmacist, medicine, social work, we're looking at trying to improve quality of care. And so your work supports that ability to make an impact on the outcomes that happen with patients. So the thing that's really important, of course, is to examine the needs assessment. What is it that your organization is working on? And one of the things that is a really good way to examine that is also look at what are the pain points for the organizations that you serve. Are there metrics that are being not met? Or there are Joint Commission things that people are being cited for? And does there need to be a training around that so that we can improve those outcomes? So when we think about really making an impact on what simulation can do and become a value in an institution, we really do need to address the stakeholders and the impacts that they have, the things that impact their work, and that is important. Obviously, measurable objectives, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and the simulation is based upon purpose, theory, and modality. The scenario or context is really important. Fidelity is one of the things that we talk a lot about, and I actually think we made a misstep in the beginning of our talking about fidelity, because we talked about it about a mannequin, and we talk about high fidelity mannequins and low fidelity mannequins, when in actuality, it is about the methodology. Does the methodology have fidelity? Is it realistic? Does it simulate the real experience? And so there's a lot of movement in the literature about talking about fidelity of the scenario and the scene, and that can be online, tabletop. It could be a variety of simulations, not only about a mannequin. And so when you begin to think about using the word fidelity, think about it in a broader sense, not just about a piece of equipment that we have, but about the realism that we create around that scenario and that story. We'll talk a little bit about facilitation and briefing and debriefing and evaluation as well. So the NACSL standards of best practice, outcomes and objectives, we suggest that those be designed obviously with the target outcomes in mind, but the thing that I think is important is to use some sort of methodology about your objectives, and the one that we're talking about is the SMART objectives. You can Google that and find out a whole lot more about the SMART objectives, but basically, are they measurable? Are they specific enough, achievable, realistic, and time-phased? And in that is also, are they leveled for the right type of learner that you have? So that really helps to target your work. Facilitation. We know that you may be an outstanding and fill in the blank. In my world, you might be an outstanding nurse. And you are a great bedside nurse, and then all of a sudden we move you to being a nurse manager without any additional training, and then we move you to a nurse educator, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the sim lab. And we're turning around and relying on the sim techs to say, what do I do? Because we haven't had the training. So now we know that we need to do faculty development, no matter what profession you're in, around development and training of how to do facilitation. I have seen, and I'm sure you have seen, a wide variety of quality simulations done and simulations that might not have been as high quality as you might have desired. And one of the things that's really heartbreaking is when you see a facilitator in there turning the sim lab all of a sudden into a lecture. And so then why do we book sim time, sim resources to really conduct a lecture with a group of, and enter the number, 4, 8, 12? That doesn't make any sense, doesn't it? So we see that, so we need to move facilitators to the ability to facilitate, to be able to be that person who's asking questions, nudging, guiding, but not stepping up to teach. And the first time that you step up to start in a lecture mode, your learners will turn to you for the information. And so you've shut down this collaborative learner-focused learning. So think about that, and this facilitation gives you some guidelines about how to do that. Looking at particularly the methodology of how do you facilitate, and assuming the responsibility and oversight of the whole experience from development to implementation to evaluation and refinement of it. And that's a continuum. I do a lot of interprofessional simulations, and when we're developing those, we're with medicine and pharmacy right now, and they are at the table for the design, the implementation, and the evaluation. So when we're facilitating, they're present. So it's not like one of us will take it and do it, because then the learners who are in that room who don't see someone like them are not able to translate what they're learning as readily. Because obviously I do not know the full depth and breadth of the work of a pharmacist or a physician, but I know more about nursing, and I can bring that to the table. So you want to approach this for level learning with the experience of the learners, and sometimes people feel like the preparatory activities are important, and that depends upon what is your outcome, and also the level. When we start our simulations, we have preparatory information, but as we move through the semester and get towards the end, we try to simulate having arrived on a unit and going to be taking care of multiple patients. So there's not as much preparatory as there is in the beginning, where we're trying to learn to teach them how to care for patients. So it depends upon what you're trying to accomplish. And then you have to determine, are you going to deliver cues, and how are they going to be delivered? And I bet if we asked, there probably would be at least 25 different ways that you deliver cues. But some of the clever ways to do it is let it come from a family member, the patient themselves. You might rotate in the room as another professional, like a attending or a charge nurse. So you can bring cues without stopping and becoming the teacher. Once you do that, remember, you've become teacher-focused. And then debriefing gets a lot of press because it's harder than we think. And so there's a lot of work out there about debriefing. And so I would ask you to continue reading, because it's ever evolving. And the standard about it talks about using a planned debriefing. There's debate about, does the debriefing need to be as long as the sim, or twice as long as the sim, or what is the magic number? No one's determined what's the magic number at this point. It kind of is about what you need to accomplish in that debriefing. One of the challenges that I think we have is we feel like debriefing is the most important piece, and it is, but if you don't have a well-designed simulation, you don't have a great springboard from which to do the debriefing. So the simulation has to be done quite well to have quality debriefing. So all of it's important. But the other piece of it is you can't debrief everything that you see. So you have to make notes and decisions about what are you going to debrief in the simulation. Obviously, you're debriefing the things that point to your objectives and your outcomes. And that's your blueprint, if you imagine. And then anything that is an error or something that is aberrant that you need to correct before the people leave the room. So those are the things that you have to do. And Lance set us up here. I've not ever looked at that video from this point of view until today, but wouldn't that be a great way to teach about debriefing? Or facilitation, because that instructor was exasperated and lost. And so if we would use that to say, if you ever been in that situation and you lost your learners, or how do I deal with that? So that's a great way to maybe use as a training for facilitation, because facilitation was not happening in that clip. So thanks for that new vision. And then we know that we have to be thinking about how we're going to debrief it and what methodology we're going to use. It has to be done, debriefing has to be facilitated, and that's again not teaching, but facilitated by someone who has seen the sim and who has been trained in debriefing and who has the ability to call out of the learner what they were thinking. So I've been trained in the debriefing with good judgment from the Cambridge group, Center for Medical Simulation. There are many methodologies out there. Choose the one that you like. I think it probably makes sense in your institution with a particular group of learners to use one that they can get familiar with and understand how to respond to. But you may find in your situation it depends upon the learners who came in, and some types work better with others. But having them congruent with your outcomes and objective is good. And this is just 3, but there's many more. Debriefing for Meaningful Learning, that's Chris Dreyfus's work. Debriefing Good Judgment, Jenny Rudolph and Dan Raymer, and that group did that. Plus Delta is how we started out. That began in the industries before us, aviation, nuclear medicine. And so those are the ones that you can still use. They still work, but they don't get down to the depth of what you were thinking. So you might blend these. You might start out with a plus Delta and then move to others. So there are references in the slide deck for those, and also on the NACSL standard of debriefing, it has a whole list of debriefing references. So if you're still learning and wanting to know more, go there and use that as your reading summer reading list. Participant evaluation, we don't really need to know any more about are they satisfied and feel like this really works for them. We need to know more about how does it change practice. And so that's kind of how the evaluations really need to do. We often, when we think, oh, I got a great idea, I need to develop an instrument, go find an instrument so that you can have psychometrics that work with it instead of having an instrument that's not been vetted for reliability. And so that would be important. And there are not only some in this reference list, but also on the interprofessional education, the Nexus, the national standard, the National Center for Interprofessional Education, they have a whole area for measurement and outcomes. So go there if you're doing something interprofessionally for tools that really work. We use the Mayo tool for our IPE because we're focusing on teamwork, collaboration, and communication. And that tool really looks at team step skills, and that is what we need for our outcomes as an example. So choose the tool to fit your outcomes. Don't go recreate the wheel. Add to the literature about the tool. The criteria is this method of evaluating not only the student's experience, but also the simulation and the work of the faculty. And that becomes a little bit uncomfortable when we start evaluating ourselves about how well did I facilitate, how well did I debrief. But if we're about teaching and learning, we need to be on the continuum of ever improving our own practice. So think about that, about evaluating yourselves. Professional integrity, simulation allows us to see what really is happening for a learner. You get to see how do they treat patients, how do they dress, how do they approach things. You'll uncover things that people have not yet seen in clinical practice and be able to address those for professional integrity and the things that we want our learners to be out there. And that simulation is a window into that behavior. People say, oh, I would have not done that I would not have done that in real life. But there's literature that says if they did it in sim, they do it in real life. So we can't stand on, I wouldn't do it in real life because this is just pretend. And you're going, no, there is literature that does support that what you do here is what you would do in practice. So I've now done something funky, Lance, about I got it, okay. Foster and role model the attributes that you want in your professional learners. So that means that you treat them with respect, you treat them as people who have a lot of intellect and who are trying to do the right thing. And so with that, you are then calling that out of them as a learner so that they can actually do that. You want to create a safe learning environment. This is another place that I think we're struggling in the literature that we have. We talk about psychologically safe places, and sometimes our learners think that means that you don't correct me. But in actuality, psychologically safe means I correct you because I'm obligated to help you become the best professional you want to be, and I share my expertise with you to help you move along that continuum. And so because this is difficult, doesn't mean that it's not safe. Safe means I'm respectful, I'm kind in the way that I deliver this, and I also am not dinging them and failing them out of a program for one event. So rethink about psychologically safe and continue to watch the literature about the way that that evolves. We know that requiring confidentiality and keeping that confidential about what happens is important because, one, you're protecting your scenario so that you can use it over and over, and another is you're protecting the professional identity and regard for each other without going, geez, this person is terrible, how can they ever be a nurse or a physician? When in fact they're in the learning mode, right? We're there so that mistakes can be revealed. And then the IPE really is talking about having different professions come together. I can't emphasize enough the importance of having the professions at the table that you're working with, that you can't design a realistic dietitian simulation without that brain at the table, because you're making assumptions about what you know, and you need that to be present when you're making the linkages for your objectives and your outcome. You need to have a theoretical framework. I think the IPEC competencies are great. They're nationally recognized. They're already got objectives there and outcomes, so don't recreate the wheel. Use what is nationally recognized. And then the glossary is just that. The words that were used in the standards are in a glossary so that you can actually get to them. And again, I'm pointing you to the dictionary for a more complete dictionary type reference that was done by many organizations. Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. How can they? We spent so much time in it, right? But they will never forget how you made them feel. So that's part of our job, is to make them feel like they're learning and that they can be that profession that they dream to be. And we are helping them on that journey. And the journey is theirs, but we're bringing our expertise to bear. So in order to do this simulation for 50% that our boards of nursing said that we can do, you do have to have not only preparation of the faculty, but the program has to have been invested and have the resources to do it. They have to be mapped. You have to include IPE. You have to sometimes use in situ and designated personnel. Initially, we were thinking, well, everybody needs to be trained on simulation and on our faculty. Not everybody's good at doing simulation, right? As not everybody's good at lecturing. Not everybody's good at clinical supervision. So we need to use the skill sets that are best and train a core group of faculty. And look at the design and use SMART objectives. Always have somebody look at it with you, a peer review, an evaluation and iterative reliability of each semester. Any questions? I was asked to give you a snapshot of the standards so that you could go and review them more deeply. We are having our first international conference in Toronto next June. You're all invited if you would like, and you can go to our website and register. But I would like for you to think about, those of you who have not, using the standards to integrate them into your work so that you actually can bring up the level of the quality of your simulations to a standard that is recognized around the world.
Joe, you had a question?
I was just wondering about, are you going to be around the conference?
I'm going to be here all day. Okay. So if anybody wants to talk to me or ask me other questions, I would love to have a conversation with you. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Carol. A round of applause for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sorry about the slides.
It's okay.
I apologize about the slides. I didn't realize we had an issue there, but I'm going to try to switch over a computer, and then we'll have our second keynote here. Ryan, do you have any audio, buddy? No. Oh, okay.
I'm just going to take away this title.
1 second, let me,
So it doesn't. I don't even see it.
oh, it's on the other.
Well, you know what? We'll just
Is that right? 13 slides? Yeah. Okay, how do I do presentation mode on this? Ah, here it is. Good?
Oh, great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Hi. Again, I'm Brian Gillette. I'm an emergency medicine physician and the founder and executive officer at SimCHOSTS. It is a great honor and privilege to have this opportunity to talk with you today. Simulation has been a passion of mine for well over a decade and a half. I feel a very particular connection with SimOps specialists, not necessarily from a simulation perspective, though I've lived and breathed the pain points from the beginning where you're opening up the mannequin trying to solve problems. But I connect with sim operations specialists as an emergency medicine physician. I think that we very much have similar mindsets, and we have similar challenges in that we're thrown curveballs every day during our job, and yet we MacGyver it. We figure out how to solve the problem in real time, behind the scenes, so that our objectives go off without a hitch, no matter what we're thrown. And that's something to really be proud of and special. The last presentation was so well done and important. I think what the new and Axel standards are reflective of the growth and evolution of simulation from the very early days when this was very much a thing of research in the academic circles to evolving into a well-adopted, pervasive tool in undergraduate and graduate clinical education across multiple disciplines. And now finally what we're seeing, what these guidelines reflect, is this last push of simulations penetration into the clinical use space where we're actually using this to train practicing professionals. This is amazing, but what it brings is it brings a lot of new challenges, right? So I'd like to start out with a real-life clinical vignette that had resonance, very, very profound resonance for me. This is the story of Mr. G. He's a 76-year-old man, healthy guy, and one day finds himself emergently admitted to a hospital, hypotensive with chest pain, severe shortness of breath, really circling the drain, and is promptly diagnosed with an aortic valve rupture. Now, this is a really big deal, especially for a person in this age group. He's rushed off to the OR. Everything couldn't have gone more smoothly. In the emergency department, he has this miraculous surgery, amazing technology and skills and teamwork by the operative team. Chest is open. Aortic valve is successfully replaced. He finds he survives the OR, gets to the cardiothoracic ICU, does very well, and 48 hours later is now on a cardiac floor, awake, eating, and that's just amazing. But then something happened. This gentleman who just survived the unsurvivable because of our great technology and clinical care, ends up suddenly developing severe respiratory distress. He starts drowning in his fluid. He has acute CHF. Now, this is not, what just happened is not a complication of the surgery, but rather a medical error that was the result of a breakdown in communication. What turns out that this gentleman never received a very standard medication that's given after the surgery. He never received his diuretic drip. So typically, after this surgery, it's almost routinely it's done in your sleep. A diuretic of du jour is written for all these patients, and it keeps the fluid out, and they recover. So what I didn't mention is that this patient was actually my father, just very, very recently. So, you know, I'm wearing my hat as a son, I'm wearing my hat as a physician, I've got my patient safety and education and academic hat on, thinking, gosh, you know, how did this happen? Such great medicine and great save. How is it this thing that actually caused something so severe? Now, at the end of the day, he did fine. Clinical care team came in. Everyone rushed. Had dealt with the respiratory failure. Ultimately, got him diuresed. He left the hospital, and God bless him, he's bicycling, you know, like 20 miles a day at his age, and is doing great. But the reason I relate this is because I think that what happened here represents the new challenges that face us in simulation education. We need now that we're catering to professional staff, we need to shift the focus of our training to pair up the training priorities against things that are actually happening in real life on clinical floors. It's a lot more straightforward to design graduate and undergraduate medical or just clinical educational programs because there's just content that they have to learn, and they have to do this experientially. But when we take professional staff off the floors into a unit, we really need to start pairing up the training against the real vulnerabilities that they're experiencing on their unit. So how do we identify breakdowns? I have always applied 3 principles, and I think this is very important to think about and talk about as operations specialists. We focus a lot on technology, but we all are here for the same reason. We have the same shared mental model of improving healthcare performance and healthcare delivery. So how do we, what is this? How do we identify what these breakdowns are? Well, there's sort of 3 principles. There's countless articles written about this, but basically the 3 principles that I would encourage you to take away and discuss with your clinical counterparts when you think through these breakdowns and identify what should be driving the scenario content is in these discussions, keep it real, keep it cool, and get it simple. So by keeping it real, that means there's a ton of factors that relate that are influences with regard to medical errors. But we want to identify the real actionable behavioral problems that we can do something about. So let's kind of like step down the academic jargon and start to just get more real. What actually happened here? Keep it cool. This is not a witch hunt. We to err is human, which we've all heard like 1,000 times. The idea is that we want to foster a kind of a collaborative environment where we want to talk about, we want to self-reflect on what happened when things didn't go the way we wanted them to in the clinical environment, just in the same way that we apply those principles in the simulation environment. I encourage you to bring what you do in the simulation debriefs back to your clinical counterparts and encourage them to do the same in real life on the floors. And then you want to get it simple. So getting it simple means identifying the fundamental actionable breakdown. Now, what happened here? Well, in this situation, the MDs just assumed that the other one had ordered this medicine. It's not rocket science. Everyone, it's just something that happens. Everyone knows they're going to order this diuretic after the surgery. The cardiologist thought the hospitalist was doing it. The hospitalist thought the cardiologist was doing it. There was a lack of using closed-loop communication. Now, that's something that happens all the time, and it doesn't always result in the big miss, the big bad event. But by getting at these near misses, and identifying the fundamental aspects that cause them, we now can start creating scenarios that target these behaviors, these breakdowns, before they turn into a big problem. With regard to on the RN side, well, after breaking it down more and more, you identify so this order, just wasn't written. These RNs are multi-decade professionals here in the cardiac unit, It's not that they have any lack of knowledge with regard to this medicine needing to be written, but for some reason it wasn't brought up. And in academics, we don't feel this as much, but it's there. There's hierarchical dynamics that can destroy or result in team breakdowns. So in this situation, you know, I wanted to explore what happened in a very. I wanted to apply the principles that I apply every day in my simulation operations to a discussion with the clinical care teams about what really happened. So here, the first RN saw that the order wasn't there. Figured, well, I don't really want to bother the hospitalist in the middle of the night. That should never be the case, right? Ever. We're a team. Every voice is valid, and we need to be able to. We need to flatten hierarchy, and that's how we can prevent, you know, a large number of errors. So in this situation, we went through this exercise that my kids, when they were much younger, used to do to me. They ask a question, why? I give an answer, because. It's always followed by another why, and it's a because, until one of us gets tired or can't tolerate it anymore. But it's the why because is how we get at the root cause. So why did the patient develop respiratory failure? Well, Lasix wasn't given, or the diuretic drip. Why wasn't the diuretic drip given? It wasn't ordered. Why wasn't it ordered? Well, here we had just identified it was a closed-loop communication issue. How come this wasn't raised? This was a problem with flattening hierarchical dynamics. These are things that we can now, as simulation experts and champions, these are things that we can use to inform our training. We can design a scenario that may only be like a 2 to 3 minute scenario for our clinical teams, and just, you're not trying to trap them, you can even relate up front. There's this problem, there's this vulnerability here where we don't have, we're having a little difficulty with closed loop communication on the labor and delivery floor. Let's actually just practice it. You know, I'm not going to try to trick you into not using it in the simulation exercise. We're just going to practice how this goes down. So what I'm getting at here is that as simulation pedagogy finds its way increasingly into professional training, we need to start turning our attention to the underlying team components that result in the big bad outcomes, and start addressing those to prevent them before they happen. These are the near misses. The near misses are the golden egg of content that we should be looking for when we design our training activities. What is a near miss? It's an unplanned event that didn't actually result in a lasting damage or a death, but it had potential to do so. And because nothing really bad happened, as in this case, you know, this patient, my father, was discharged, because nothing actually lasting happened, that whole breakdown, that whole learning opportunity just sort of disappears as if it never happened. And one day, the same factors that related and caused that near miss are going to ultimately cause the big miss, the big bad outcome. So this is a framework shift that I think all of us simulation champions need to be attentive to. So, you know, it's so important to me that I think this represents the two major challenges in simulation, and it's very much what these new NACSL guidelines are getting at. The two big questions are: what do we need to be? What should we be training, and how can we ensure it's impactful? So the what is let's get the training to the right people around the right problems at the right time, and then let's start circling back with our clinical counterparts and measuring whether or not our interventions are having an impact. Is there a decrease in these types of vulnerable situations that deal with team management? So how do we get there? Well, you get there. You get us there. You know, you are the experts in clinical simulation. It's not the directors or the fellows. You are the cornerstone of the entire operation. And and directly the cornerstone of successful training outcomes, because you do this every day. There's countless technical tasks that the operations specialists have to do. You know that stuff inside out, and now you're ultimately the last stop with regard to scenario design. There's an increasing requirement for you to train facilitators. This is actually reflective of a good thing. So the fact that many of our facilitators, as you just related, are not simulation gurus, but rather subject matter experts, they're relying on you to help show them, what do we do here? How would you go about using the simulation pedagogy to impart my objectives? So you are the nuts and bolts of this entire culture change in simulation. You're defining its culture. You're the litmus test for whether or not the whole thing makes sense. When your content experts come in and you have scenarios or a curriculum that's going to run, see if it passes the smell test. Is the training that you're doing that day paired up with what's happening on the floors? Talk to the participants. They're going to tell you, this is kind of interesting, but I don't need to. It's not that I need to train in this one in how to do this procedure, but it's rather we're just having all these communication problems. So see if the professional staff training passes your smell test. And again, it's the near misses, which is what we need to start looking for. Start engaging your clinical counterparts to identify what kind of things are happening. Where are the breakdowns on the floor that didn't result in anything bad? So drilling, I swear when I made this title, I was not trying to rhyme. But so drilling near misses really does prevent the real misses. This is a familiar photo to many of us. It's found its way into a lot of simulation presentations. What really is resonant to me about this situation is that it on the surface, a simulation that allowed the pilots and the crew to avert this potential catastrophe sounds very much on the surface like the high stakes and frequently encountered event scenario. But really, there was a lot more going on here. There was a ton of communication that went down on this plane in the few minutes between it taking off at LaGuardia and landing in the Hudson River that transpired that resulted in this amazing outcome. So just to kind of refresh the memory, this plane took off and geese. It flew into a flock of geese. The geese took the engines out. So pilot and co-pilot have to communicate to one another effectively about an engine restart plan, going through the checklist of engine restart plan. Can we get the engines back online? And the answer was no. And at the same time, the cockpit and air traffic control have to constantly communicate, message back and forth the status. Cockpit and flight attendants have to message what's going on. Flight attendants have to communicate with the passengers. After it's been identified that the plane's not going to make it to an alternative landing site, there's the decision to land in the Hudson River has to get communicated back to air traffic control. Air traffic control has to then communicate effectively with the Coast Guard to clear the river out and get all the boats out of the way. All of this happened like a beautifully orchestrated dance, and it happened without a hitch. And it wasn't just the mechanical flight simulator that trained you how to actually do a crash landing. It's all of this communication that happened. I liked, Kitty Higgins was the spokesperson for the National Transportation and Safety Board at that time, and she read in a statement, these people knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it, and as a result, nobody lost their life. Well, this is because they drill the near misses. fortunately, there's not a preponderance of airline crashes to learn from, unlike the situation in the 70s. So they take near misses very seriously. Close friend, and we have family in the aviation industry, relates that just a breakdown in communication, something so subtle that would otherwise fly under the radar of any normal conversation, gets picked up, it gets identified as a possible vulnerability, fed back, and then looked at to identify if it's something that we should drill. This is the golden egg of preventing errors. We want to catch this stuff before they actually happen. So what's wrong with our traditional analytics? Right now, in healthcare, we're very focused on sort of right of boom type of problems. The bad event happened, and then we go and we look at it and we try to see what went wrong, how we can improve it. Well, there's a tendency to focus on the what instead of the why in that approach, and you're always reactive. You're just waiting for the incident to occur. This is traditionally how we've designed simulation scenarios in the past. We've used and we've learned a lot from big bad outcomes to inform training. But now I want to encourage you to shift away from that and start identifying, thinking about ways that we can get at identifying the factors that cause these near misses that never hit the radar. There are about 35 million admissions to the hospital system in this country annually. Less than 1% of those admissions is a death from a medical error. So in fact, it's one is too many, and in fact, we now know that medical errors are the third leading cause of death in our country. But just the sheer numbers, in fact, it's about 0.6 to 0.7% of medical errors result in death given the total admission population. So if we're using the big bad event to inform our training, we just don't even have the statistical power to get there. There's not enough of these events. Whereas we know that 1 in 7 patients that come in to the hospital are going to experience some sort of harm, some kind of medical error. So there's like a ton of these little low, I guess level of behavioral events that are happening, breakdowns in communication that we can get at and prevent the big bad event. We can be left of boom instead of right of boom. So how do we get at these near misses? This is something that's been of immense interest to me as a researcher, as an academic, and now as the executive officer at SimCHOSTS. This has been sort of the raison d'etre of my work in simulation. There's some clinical tools that are starting to be adopted now. So on the real life side, the clinicians can use clinical event debriefs and huddles to talk about what went well. We can use the plus delta method, which is a real simple way of just saying, a plus is something that went well, a delta is something that needs to be changed. So you can encourage your clinical counterparts, your content experts who come into the simulation lab to run scenarios with you. You can encourage them to start doing huddles and event debriefs using just even this plus delta is a real easy way to convey it. Talk to each other. Find out what's not working. In a real clinical event debrief, that's done right after the encounter. You break for about 2 minutes and go through a structured form that helps identify the specific breakdowns. A huddle could be as simple as, like at the end, at 2 times a day, the team's going to come together and just talk about what's going on, what do we need to do right now, and then also take that opportunity to identify anything that you'd like to change. On the simulation side, as champions, we're using the why because methodology to identify the breakdowns that we want our instructors to employ when designing scenarios. And as simulation operations experts and specialists, you can help shape that development. So design your scenarios around these underlying breakdowns, and then we need to continue surveillance of the clinical unit to identify if there's impact. There are tools that are out there. You just Google and you can pick a tool that works for you. This was the entire motivation for and mission of my company, is to create software solution that's more than just a simulation management and center management system, but provides tools to get at these clinical event debriefs and bridge that gap. Changing culture is not obviously an easy thing to do, but someone has to start. And it starts with the individual, and it starts with us. There's a real classic sort of 4-component evolution of culture change. This is like changing the course of a ocean liner. Okay, it's not a motorboat, so it's a slow-moving process. Most of us start in this pathological space. Perfectly reasonable, normal human beings exist in this first sort of space very often, where it's like, it's not, I don't specifically have the problem. Things are seemingly going okay with my patients, and it's not really my problem. It's kind of a waste of time to do all this sort of exercises. That's a starting point that many clinicians have when they walk into your simulation space, and we can help shape that by having conversations with them to help raise awareness that there's actually a lot of things going on in the team that we can improve upon using this immersive experiential learning paradigm. Then the next phase in a healthcare system towards a culture of safety usually ends up being reactive. It's still very much where we live right now. We're waiting for the event. We do something when something happens. And then we kind of wind up in this bureaucratic phase, which is actually a good thing, because there needs to be systems in place. In this phase, the healthcare system has bought into the idea that we need to be thinking, we need a way of reporting and cataloging these events, but it kind of stops there. It doesn't then go to the next phase of let's use these events to actually start training activities, and let's dig deeper and start looking for things before they've actually happened. And then we finally wind up in this proactive phase, which is, we are always on the alert for risks. And that's what you want to inspire in these clinicians that come through your centers. Change is really hard. These are, the science of culture change is a massive field, tons published about it. But there's these 3 sort of components that are requisite to any culture change. There's the person level, the people, the teams. There's the processes and technology. With regard to people, to get change in healthcare and towards a culture of safety, the individuals have to believe that there is a that they need the change. They have to. It sounds a little silly, but there's a lot of folks, like the majority, I would say, don't think that there's a problem, and it's up to us experts to start to help shift that. We want to message to our clinical staff, our participants, that together we're going to identify these underlying problems, and I want you to help give me some ideas for simulations. That's a great way to get people to buy in. Give me some ideas for things that we might need to train. Process really is all about how do we execute. So you have to have processes in place to describe, to define what the problems are, and to execute your solutions. Now, with regard to technology, you are experts in technology, but I would encourage you to think about systems. You need a system to instill change and make it sustainable. A system could be as simple as a shared Excel document that your clinical counterpart on a pediatric floor is going to use on a SharePoint or an online form to enter in problems, de-identified problems that then you can have that can inform training. There has to be a system. Now this has been the focus of my company is developing this system. It doesn't have to be rocket science, a simple Excel document. Now, I am very much a simulation champion, and I will be for life. Right now, I'm living the simulation champion life in industry as opposed to the academic side where I spent the majority of my career. We have a need for cultural change also. We need to be more client-centric, like it was in the old days. Right now, there's so much proprietary technology, and they don't talk with each other. So on our side, we're trying to, through SimAlliance, we're trying to create a culture that fosters interoperability between technologies. Just because you use the Beeline camera system shouldn't mean that you can't then pull vitals off of your Laerdal mannequin or whatever. We need to bring back a culture of interoperability and client-centric approach. I know that we can do this and still be responsible business leaders to our own companies, and this is something that we hope to achieve through SimAlliance. So I'm going to leave you with just some last parting thoughts. SimOps specialists are the experts in simulation. You know more about this craft than probably most of the faculty that walk through your centers. So don't be afraid to speak up as a vital member of the team. See yourself as a partner in this simulation team and in the mission. Make recommendations when you see something that doesn't pass your litmus test, your smell test. Bring it up. Create the huddles in your own organization to talk about change. Your practices are what affects cultural change in our pedagogy. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to speak with this group and look forward to a great SimGHOSTS 2017.
All right, everyone, thank you so much. So now we've got a quick break with the vendors until our sessions start at 10 a.m. Courses do actually take place in here as well. So this is Andrews 1 and 2, 6 and 7, 3, 4, 5 are all just right around the corner. And there might be some things in the actual simulation center. This is the conference center that we're in now. The simulation center is just back beyond the catering, past where the drinks are going to be served throughout the entire event, the soda machines and the coffee in the Wake Med Center, and those folks will help direct you to those courses there. So if you have any questions, Kiana, our operations manager, is here. I'm here. We've got our SimGHOSTS board of director members here, Nick Brower, Scott Crawford, Billy, volunteer, Rachel is here, and Farouz. So if you need our help, just look for folks with red shirts, and we'll help you out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
We are on the same page in terms of patient
really
safety.
are.
Yes. And I'm glad your dad survived the event.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the thing that, you're right.